Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today at GasDiesel Garage is Don't Get Screwed by the Dealer Day on this 98 Buick Century. There's a common problem with these and the dealer takes advantage of you. So stay tuned, you'll find out what it is. Now the common problem that my customers experience with this is that every time she gets the oil change, she thinks her oil is over full. Well, it's not that the oil is over full. Let's check this out. I don't know if you can see that. See how over full that is? It's actually supposed to be right about there, but very over full. And when I see something like that, and the text says that he put the exact amount of quarts in, which is about 4.8 quarts, about 5 quarts with the oil filter itself, but you start to smelling it, it doesn't smell right. It smells like there's coolant mixed in with the oil. Now most people think that it's a head gasket, and oh my god, it's filling the crankcase full of coolant, and oh my god, my engine's about to blow up. But number one is, this engine is not smoking out of the tailpipe. This engine is not overheating. This engine has lower intake gaskets that are cracked inside and leaking the coolant down inside the crankcase. For all my techs out there, I did pressure test this coolant system on this engine, and the gauge did drop over time, of course, not by very much, but that just shows me that this is leaking internally. Now throughout the 1990s, when they put these engines in, the 3.1 liter V6s and the 3.4 liter V6s, these were notorious for these lower intake gaskets to be leaking. So I'm pretty sure that that's what our problem is. So all we have to do is take it apart and inspect it. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take out all the ignition coils, the spark plug wires, the throttle body, the intake boot, and this cover up here, and let's get to it. Now, word of the wise, when you're taking this off, make sure you go really slow, because I'll show you why. Be very careful. Put it on gently and take it off gently, because you break that little nipple off, you gotta replace the whole thing, unfortunately. And they're not cheap. Now, because the throttle body sits lower than the radiator, I like to cap these lines off so I don't get sprayed with coolant, like I did here. Now it's time to take the fuel rail off, the fuel injector wiring harness, and might want to cover some of these holes, but you don't want to drop nothing down the side there. Even though you can, fish the stuff out when you actually get the lower intake off. But moving right along. One thing I didn't mention earlier is that you're going to have to take the alternator out to get the valve covers out because it's blocking some of the bolts. And also too, when you're dealing with the alternator or anything electrical like that, starters, make sure you disconnect that battery cable so you don't get electrocuted. Fortunately, you got to take the alternator bracket out just to access the power steering bolts. Those are only on 3 ones. Move the power steering out of the way. Now what we got to do is take the rockers off and the push rods, because those intake or lower intake gaskets, they run under it. So let's get it done. Look at how bad that sludge is. I mean, that thing had to been leaking internally for a while. It's gonna be hell trying to clean that stuff. Yeah. Start spraying down the engine. This is some good stuff. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh my God, he's spraying down all the orifices with all this brake cleaner and engine degreaser. He's getting all that stuff inside the combustion chamber and everything else. But am I? Well, that's not possible, because remember, we took out all the push rods. Therefore, none of the valves are open. So nothing is going down inside the combustion chamber and filling them up. So we're not going to have an issue of it hydrolocking as soon as we start it up or anything like that. But what I'm going to do is let this stuff sit overnight and degrease for a little while because of all this sludge. And we're going to come back tomorrow and finish this job up. Well, now that you got the intake off the engine, it's time to clean all this stuff up. All the mating surfaces for all the gaskets. And if you see down in there, you can scrape some of that crap out. That's right up in there where the injectors sit. And if you have access to a parts washer like I do, just throw it in there for a few minutes. It'll clear it all up. Then you got to buff some of it out, but you get the gist. And also do the same that we just did to the lower intake to the upper intake. Clean all that off. Well, it's been 24 hours. Let's see how well that sludge got cleaned out of the heads. Let's see, that's pretty clean. Well, Of course, there's still going to be some still in it, but after a few oil changes, it's going to be cleared up anyways. So the next step is to just clean up all this old gasket material all over these runners. And then we can start putting this thing back together. Right. Now that the runners are clean, now we can install the lower intake gaskets. Now, the set that I got was from CarQuest. This kit was about 60 bucks. Now you can get the bigger kit with a lot more O-rings and gaskets and stuff, but the main thing that we needed was these lower intake gaskets and the upper intake gasket. Now when installing these lower intake gaskets, they got these little tabs right there. You see these little holes? Right there, right there. Well, they get held on just like that. Just snap them in. They snap in pretty good. And it's not really hard to get these mixed up, because you can tell they're wrong if you have them mixed up, because you'll see the holes halfway closed off. Snap it just like that. And of course you want to put some silicone from here to here around that run right there, so you can seal it. And don't worry, you can put a lot of this stuff on. Matter of fact, I prefer it so you know it's going to be sealed and not leak. Now it's always good practice before you start putting the push rods back in. Make sure you put some fresh oil down on those lifters. Now, something I like to do when I put push rods in, I like to clean them up, stick them in oil, and then stick them in. Now, of course, once you got them in, the push rods I was talking about, make sure you seat them in the ball of the rocker, just by hand, because they're going to be torqued here in just a few seconds. Next thing you're going to do is you're going to torque the rocker on bolts with a digital torque wrench. I'll show you how this works. Turn this digital. Well, let's go. Go to foot-pounds. Well, you can sit there and you can go up and down until you find it. 14 foot-pounds, that's what we're looking for. Then you're going to press this angle button. You're going to go all the way down to 30. Okay, I'll let it sit still. Should be good to go. Well, now that you got everything torqued down and tight, time to put that intake on. Now that everything's back together, all we got to do now is change that nasty oil that's still in the crankcase and then fill everything up with fresh fluids. Now that all the fluids are in it, it's time to fire it up. Hey, she purred like a kitten. Well, that's a wrap for this episode of Gas Diesel Garage. Make sure you like and subscribe and ring that bell for the post notifications so you don't miss a thing. See you next time. Peace.